Okay, we are in Screencast, chapters 1, 2, and 3, part 4. And we last left off looking at some work by the artist Brancusi. And we were going to start out with this slide. So remember, we were talking about form. And we're taking a step back. What is defining form? Form is shape in 3 dimensions. So when we call it shape, it's just on a flat piece of paper. So you draw a triangle. And when you have a form, you have a pyramid. So see the difference there? Now, this is a fish, of course. And normally if we were in class, I'd ask a student to come up to the board and draw the fish in the most basic form. So think about that. What would you draw? And most people would go up and kind of draw the basic shape and then start putting some fins on it and an eye and a little mouth. And I'd be like, okay, so is there anybody else who can get this down even simpler than what it is? And normally what students will come up with is that basic kind of Jesus fish shape, if you can understand that. Okay, let's look at Brancusi's fish. Okay, so when you look at this, if you looked at this without the title, you would have no idea this is fish. I would say that 100% of you would be like, nope, I do not see a fish. And then if I tell you, remember, looking at a title will help you understand it. So that's a big part of art, and understanding art, you got to take the time to look. Sometimes you have to look at the artist's name. Sometimes you have to look at the title. Sometimes you need to know the background information, like the Myra portrait. Okay, so with this, seeing it titled Fish, okay, I being the art professor, I look at this and I don't necessarily see a fish shape, although if you didn't have any fins on it, you didn't have any facial features, no operculum, none of that, then okay, it's the basic kind of shape of a fish, okay? But the material that's chosen kind of helps me get a feel for it because it looks almost water-like, or like it has streaks, or like it's moving through water. Okay, so if I say that, think about in Finding Nemo, the little fish that point the way to Sydney. Kind of reminds me of that a little bit. Okay, so it might be a reach for some of you, but kind of reminds me of that. Okay, this is one of his more famous pieces called Bird in Space. Okay, do we see a bird? Probably not. Most people say they see something that's more of a feather shape, so it's reminiscent of a bird, since feathers come from birds. The in space part I get a little bit more, just for the simple fact of we haven't been in class to talk together, but I am a total sci-fi nerd kind of geek. And so therefore I get this whole look of space that sort of looks like the little screen on an astronaut's helmet that they put down to save their face from the sun. I kind of get that feel from that. But the only thing that I could find that I thought was kind of familiar to this is the shape of the body of a hummingbird. So if the hummingbird did not have the wings, that basic streamlined shape, sure. It may be, if you've ever watched a bird diving into the water after its food, kind of that same shape. Now, this one's kind of funny because usually there's at least one other person in the class who's a parent besides myself. My kids are older now, but I definitely understand the crying baby. Okay, so I normally would have somebody come up, draw on the board, taking this as your reference, draw a baby in its most simplest form. So of course everybody starts out with the either oval or the circle, and they have to draw the eyes and the nose and the mouth, and it starts to get to where there's more information there than what you need. Okay, one of the things that defines a baby and the crying aspect of it is if you drew the mouth, oh, there's a big circle there, like ah. Okay, but yeah, there's something that I know myself, just being an artist and paying attention to those things. You probably pay attention to it too. My husband, for example, knows when he's in trouble. He knows when I'm mad at him. He knows when I'm upset, because my chin There's something that will happen with my chin that will let him know that I'm like upset. Okay, so instead of that circle, just an open circle for a mouth, you then put almost like that upside down smile curvature at the bottom of the mouth. Then it looks like that baby screaming. So here is Brancusi's baby screaming, and there's that little chin looking thing for the mouth. So very interesting. And I think when you look at that one, if you saw the title Baby Crying, you would understand that one. Okay, so a lot of the artwork that we've looked at is what we kind of consider to be tabloid type of art. Shock art, exploitation of something horrific, taking advantage of a bad situation and using that to further advance your own motives, career, whatever it might be. Okay, so today's critics will often refer to this type of art as what we call visual culture. This can encompass movies, TV, advertising, comic books, graphic novels, reality TV. Okay, I can remember reality TV kind of started when I was in undergraduate school and Jerry Springer was on. And you know what I'm talking about, that Jerry. I don't believe I learned a thing from the Jerry Springer show other than maybe my shoe could become a weapon. Okay, so if you've ever seen the Jerry Springer show, you know what I'm talking about. That's a part of that visual culture. Now, another reality TV show, which I'm finding that most people never watched, which would explain why it had no popularity. It was probably on the National Geographic Channel. It was called The Colony. And what it was taking people of various backgrounds, careers, in a post-apocalyptic situation. So therefore, what would the high school science teacher, the nurse, the model, the homemaker, what could they all bring to the table to help them survive this situation? I learned things like how to purify water and all of those kinds of things. Very interesting visual culture. So visual culture doesn't always have to be something that's shocking and bad. Sometimes it can be something that is useful, but it's definitely one of those things that it's kind of pushing some boundaries. Now, art implies value. There are three things that help to imply value with art: money, social, intellectual. These things all kind of go together when we think of art. Why? Because, well, for one thing, art we think of generally costs a lot of money. At least special fine art, with the major names, they're priceless pieces of art and they cost how much? Even your everyday crafter or local artist, it still can end up costing a lot of money for that art. Now, of course, there's something that we think that goes along with that intellectual part of it. Why is that this art is worth more than this art? There has to be something that smart people who buy art know about this, right? And then there's also the social status. People who are wealthy, people who are smart, people who know something about the arts are the people who value that art. Okay, so some things to think about. That's kind of one of those kind of listing things there. That's something that you'll see me do throughout the PowerPoints is I'll try and give you a heads up on things that you will need to know for certain exams. Okay, so listings is something that you pretty much need to know for every single one of my exams. So if I have something like this, art implies value through money, social, intellectual, that's kind of a list there. So make sure you're remembering and learning and highlighting those things. Okay, so this slide, a photograph of a bunch of old beer cans, okay? First off, I'll let you know I don't drink, so I know that they are old. I just continue to use it. Budweiser is kind of, I think, the only thing that I kind of halfway really kind of recognize there. But with you being in college, the average college student, is going to be 19-ish, 20-ish, and most college students at this point maybe perhaps have had a beer. Maybe you've made a soda can or a beer can sculpture. With that being said, how much, if you had that, how much if you made, let's say, just a sculpture of beer cans or soda cans into a pyramid shape, how much would you charge for that? something to think about. Most oftentimes students will probably say, well, whatever I can do to pay for it, get reimbursed for it, so I can get more beer or more soda. Okay, so this is a sculpture that is of 2 beer cans. And the 2 beer cans. So if you made that sculpture, a lot of times most students will say, oh, $20 or, and then it goes up to, oh, I'd charge $500 for a beer can sculpture. Okay. Well, these are 2 scales, so they're the size of beer cans. And this is where you need to start asking those questions that you may not be familiar with how to ask. What is the material that we made it out of? It's bronze. Okay, that's bronze being this metal sculpture. Is it hollow? Is it solid? Does that play into what the value of it should be? Sometimes it can, yes. Is it a certain type of beer? I have no idea what type of beer this is. What about coming back to the artist? The artist's name is Jasper Johns. You may not be familiar with that name, but Jasper Johns is a famous artist. And this particular sculpture is worth $1 million. So let's talk about money in some of these pieces. This is a famous piece you probably all know, Edvard Munch's The Scream. And here you see at Sotheby's, it's sold for almost $120 million. Ouch, that's a lot of money, right? Okay, one thing that you don't know that I would think that somebody who paid $120 million for this particular piece of artwork should know, there's 3 more of these. So, it's not as rare maybe as you think, but it's still one of those things that has a huge price tag and value on it. This is a close-up detail of Gustav Klimt's The Kiss. Very famous piece, sold for $135 million. So with those pieces of artwork, we're looking at not just the subject matter, but also who's the artist. And who the artist is plays a lot into how much the value of something will be. Okay, so why do we create art? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, some of you, I might be boring you right now and you're sitting there and doodling while you're listening and watching this. Sometimes it's an impulse. Sometimes some people just have this inner drive to create. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning kind of art, prehistoric art. Okay, the Chauvet Cave is called the Cave of Forgotten Dreams. It's an underground cave found in France. And in this underground cave, there are over 300 images drawn on the cave walls of different animals. So we're looking at horses, bison, lions, rhinos, all these things, and even the outlines of human hands. So here we see horses and a rhino. Here's that close-up of the rhino. First off, I'm impressed when anybody just draws anything from their head and then you can recognize it. Because a lot of times if, someone says, ooh, draw me an elephant, most of us would draw a really funny looking elephant if we weren't looking at it. So when you think about this is France. Do rhinos roam the plains in France? No. Okay, so what does that kind of tell you? Here we have lions hunting bison. Okay, those are some pretty amazing drawings of those lions, but lions hunting bison. These were drawn by people who were drawing what they had seen before. And we're dealing with a survival of the fittest type of situation, which means they're hunter-gatherers. They're traveling, they're moving from place to place because they're following their food source, which means that they were definitely in different parts of the world, traveling all over the place, just trying to find that food. Again, outlines of human hands. This was done by a blowpipe, just a representation, but they did have those outlines of the human hands on there. Okay, I am going to stop here with this particular section, and we will pick up on why were the cave paintings made in the next part.